Every year on my birthday my dead wife sent me a letter even though she had been buried 5 years ago. If someone had told me this story I would never have believed it. But it happened to me. My name is Adam Carter. I live alone in a small apartment in North London. 5 years ago I lost the love of my life. Her name was Emma. She was not only my wife, she was my best friend. The day she died felt like the end of my own life. I stood beside her grave and watched as her coffin disappeared beneath the earth. I placed a single white rose on the fresh soil and whispered goodbye. I believed that was the last time I would ever be close to her. 1 year later everything changed. It was my birthday. I woke up expecting another lonely morning. There were no phone calls, no birthday wishes, and no reason to celebrate. Then someone knocked on my front door. I walked over and opened it. There was no one outside. The street was completely empty. Only a single white envelope rested on the doorstep. My name was written across the front. The moment I saw the handwriting, my heart almost stopped. I knew every letter. I knew every curve. I had seen that handwriting thousands of times before. It belonged to Emma, the woman I had buried with my own hands 1 year earlier. My hands started shaking. I looked up and down the street hoping to catch whoever had left it. There was nobody. I picked up the envelope and slowly walked back inside. For several minutes I just stared at it. I was too afraid to open it. Finally I gathered enough courage and carefully unfolded the letter. The first line said, "Happy birthday, Adam." My eyes filled with tears. It was exactly the way Emma always wrote to me. The same words. The same style. The same warmth. Then I read the next line. "If you are reading this, then my first promise has reached you exactly on time." In that moment I realized that this was only the beginning. I had no idea that this letter would lead me to the darkest secret of my life. I kept staring at the letter for several minutes. Nothing around me felt real anymore. My hands were shaking and my heart refused to slow down. Emma had been dead for a whole year. I had seen her body. I had attended her funeral. I had stood beside her grave. So how could she possibly write this letter? I took a deep breath and continued reading. "Dear Adam, if this letter has reached you, then it means 1 full year has passed since I left this world. I know you still cry when no one is watching. I know you blame yourself every single day. But you must stop carrying that pain. None of what happened was your fault. Please do not spend the rest of your life living with regret. I want you to smile again. I want you to keep celebrating your birthday. Life is too precious to waste in sadness. And there is one more thing I need to tell you. Very soon someone unexpected will enter your life. Do not walk away from that person. Do not let fear make your decision. Trust your heart. One day you will understand why. Love always. Emma." I finished reading the letter and tears rolled down my face. Every single word sounded exactly like Emma. The way she spoke. The way she expressed her feelings. Even the way she signed her name. It was impossible for anyone to copy her so perfectly. I rushed into the bedroom and opened the old wooden box where I had kept her notebooks. I placed one of her letters beside the new one. The handwriting was exactly the same. Every word looked identical. I could not find a single difference. That night I could not sleep. Questions kept running through my mind. Had Emma written these letters before she died? Had someone been keeping them all these years? Or was someone playing a cruel game with me? The next morning I took the letter to the police station. The detective examined the envelope very carefully. After a few minutes he looked at me and said, "There are no fingerprints except yours. The envelope was posted yesterday." I stared at him in silence. Yesterday? That was impossible. Emma had been dead for a year. The detective gently handed the letter back to me. He said grief can make people believe impossible things. I walked out of the station feeling more confused than ever. Days turned into weeks. I tried to forget about the letter, but I could not. Then one rainy afternoon I stopped at a small cafe near King's Cross Station. Every table was occupied except one. A young woman sitting there smiled at me. She asked if I wanted to join her. Normally, I would have refused. Then I remembered Emma's words. Someone unexpected will enter your life. Do not walk away from that person. For a moment I stood completely still. Was this the person Emma had written about? Or was it only a strange coincidence? I took a deep breath. Then I walked toward the empty chair and sat down. I had no idea that this simple decision was about to change my life forever. The young woman smiled politely. "My name is Sophie," she said. I smiled back and introduced myself. For a few moments neither of us spoke. The sound of rain tapping against the windows filled the silence. Then Sophie laughed softly and said, "You look like someone carrying the weight of the world." I looked down at my coffee and smiled without answering. She changed the subject and started talking about London. She told me she was a freelance photographer. She loved old buildings, quiet streets, and rainy afternoons. As we talked, something felt strangely familiar. Not because I had met her before, but because she reminded me of Emma. The way she smiled. The way she listened. Even the way she looked out of the window while thinking. It all felt painfully familiar. We spent almost 2 hours talking. For the first time in 5 years I forgot about my grief. Before leaving, Sophie handed me a small card. She told me she owned a photography studio nearby. She said I was welcome to visit anytime. I thanked her and walked home. That night I could not stop thinking about what had happened. Then I remembered Emma's letter. Someone unexpected will enter your life. Do not walk away from that person. The next afternoon I decided to visit Sophie's studio. It was a beautiful old building filled with photographs from every corner of London. There were pictures of parks, bridges, streets, families, and strangers smiling at the camera. As I walked around, one photograph caught my attention. The moment I saw it, I froze. My heart almost stopped beating. The woman in the photograph was Emma. She was standing outside an old church wearing the same blue coat she loved. She was smiling directly at the camera. I slowly stepped closer. Below the picture was a date. It had been taken only 3 weeks before Emma died. My voice began to shake. I turned toward Sophie. "Where did you get this photograph?" She looked confused. "You know her?" I could barely breathe. "She was my wife." The smile disappeared from Sophie's face. She looked shocked. "That cannot be possible," she whispered. I asked her what she meant. Sophie walked toward an old wooden cabinet. She unlocked the bottom drawer and carefully removed a small leather notebook. She placed it gently in front of me. "Your wife gave me this 5 years ago," she said. "She asked me to keep it safe. She told me that one day a man named Adam would come looking for answers. When that day came, I was supposed to give this notebook to him. I felt my legs become weak. Emma knew my name would bring me here. How could she know?" With trembling hands, I opened the notebook. Most of the pages were filled with happy memories. Our first holiday together. Our wedding day. Funny little stories from our life. Then I reached the final pages. A folded piece of paper slipped onto the table. I slowly opened it. Only one sentence was written there. "Do not trust Detective Michael Hayes." I read the sentence again and again. Detective Michael Hayes was the officer who investigated Emma's death. He was the man who looked into my eyes and told me that her death was nothing more than a tragic accident. If Emma was warning me not to trust him, then everything I believed for the last 5 years was built on a lie. I could not take my eyes off the note. The words kept repeating inside my head. Do not trust Detective Michael Hayes. Nothing made sense anymore. If Emma knew she was going to die, then why did she never tell me? If her death was not an accident, then who wanted her gone? And why had Detective Hayes hidden the truth? Sophie watched me in silence. She could see the fear on my face. Then she quietly said, "There is something else you need to know. Emma did not come here only once. She visited this studio many times during the last few months of her life. Every time she looked frightened. She always checked the street before coming inside, as if someone was following her. One day I asked her if she needed help. She smiled, but her eyes were full of fear. She told me that if anything ever happened to her, I must never tell anyone about the notebook. Except one person. You. I looked at Sophie without saying a word. My heart felt heavier with every second. She opened another drawer and pulled out an old memory card. Emma left this too, she said. She told me to keep it hidden. I took the memory card with trembling hands. There was only one place where I could check what was inside. Back at my apartment, I inserted it into my laptop. The screen stayed black for a few seconds. Then a video appeared. Emma was sitting inside her car. She looked nervous. She kept looking into the rear view mirror. Finally, she looked straight into the camera. Adam, if you are watching this, it means I was right. Something has happened to me. Please do not believe anyone who says my death was an accident. Someone has been following me for weeks. I do not know who they are, but I know they want something that I found. If I disappear, you must find the truth. Then the video suddenly stopped. I searched the memory card again. There was another file. It was a photograph. At first it looked ordinary. Emma was standing outside a large office building. But when I zoomed in on the picture, I noticed a man standing across the street. He was wearing a dark coat and a black cap. His face was partly hidden. Even so, I recognized him immediately. It was Detective Michael Hayes. He had been watching Emma before she died, not investigating her death afterward. My hands became cold. The detective had lied to me from the very beginning. Just then my phone started ringing. The number on the screen was unknown. I answered without speaking. For a few seconds there was only silence. Then a deep voice finally said, "Stop looking into Emma's death. Forget everything you have found. This is your only warning." The call ended. Before I could move, another message appeared on my phone. I opened it. It contained only one photograph. Someone had secretly taken a picture of me standing inside Sophie's studio only 2 hours earlier. At the bottom of the picture were 6 chilling words. "You are being watched every second." I stared at the photograph on my phone. Someone had been watching me. Not yesterday. Not last week. Just 2 hours ago. My hands started shaking. I quickly locked every door in my apartment and closed the curtains. For the first time since Emma died, I was truly afraid. I called Sophie immediately. She answered after the second ring. Before I could speak, she whispered, "Do not come to my studio. Someone broke in an hour ago. They searched every room. But they did not take anything. They were looking for something specific." I asked if she was safe. She said yes, but her voice was trembling. We agreed to meet the next morning in a quiet public park. That night I could not sleep. I kept watching the security camera outside my apartment. At almost 3 in the morning, a black car stopped across the street. A man stepped out and stood there for several minutes. He never looked at the building. He only looked at my apartment window. Then he quietly got back into the car and drove away. The next morning I met Sophie. She looked exhausted. Dark circles surrounded her eyes. She handed me a small sealed envelope. "Emma asked me to give you this only if someone started following you." I slowly opened it. Inside was a small silver key. Wrapped around it was a tiny note. The note said, "Locker 27. St. Pancras Station. Do not tell anyone." We looked at each other. Neither of us spoke. An hour later we arrived at the station. The locker room was almost empty. I found locker 27 and inserted the key. For a second nothing happened. Then the lock clicked open. Inside was a small metal box. My heart was racing. I carefully lifted the box and opened it. There were old documents, a flash drive, several photographs, and one sealed letter with my name written on it. I opened the letter first. "Dear Adam, if you have found this box, then everything has gone wrong. The people chasing me are not strangers. One of them wears a police badge. Trust no one until you see the truth with your own eyes. The flash drive contains everything. Please finish what I could not. Love always. Emma. I immediately connected the flash drive to my laptop. The first file was a collection of scanned documents. Bank records. Property contracts. Secret payments. All connected to the same company. Then I opened the final file. It was a hidden video recorded inside an underground parking garage. Emma was secretly filming someone. A black luxury car pulled into the garage. Detective Michael Hayes stepped out. A few seconds later, another man joined him. The camera captured his face clearly. The blood drained from my face. I knew him. It was Richard Lawson, Emma's former boss. The man who had cried at her funeral. The man who hugged me and promised to help in any way he could. They shook hands. Richard handed Detective Hayes a thick envelope filled with cash. Then I heard Richard say something that changed everything. Make sure Adam never learns what Emma discovered. The video ended. I could not breathe. Emma had not died because of an accident. She had been silenced. And now the same people were coming for me. Before I could say a word, my laptop screen suddenly went black. A single message appeared in white letters. You opened the wrong file. Run. The word on my laptop screen disappeared after only a few seconds. Run. That was all it said. Then the screen went completely black. My heart was pounding. Sophie looked at me with fear in her eyes. Without saying a word, we grabbed the metal box and rushed out of the station. The moment we stepped outside, I noticed the same black car parked across the street. The engine was already running. 2 men were sitting inside. As soon as they saw us, the car pulled away from the curb. They were following us. We crossed the street and disappeared into the crowd. For nearly 20 minutes we walked through busy roads, narrow alleys, and underground passages. Finally we reached an old hotel where no one would think to look for us. Inside the room I examined every document Emma had hidden. One file stood out from the rest. It was marked private. Inside were photographs, financial records, and signed agreements. Emma had discovered a huge corruption network. Several powerful businessmen had been secretly buying old apartment buildings across London. Families were forced to leave their homes after mysterious fires and fake safety reports. Millions of pounds had been stolen through false insurance claims. The man behind everything was Richard Lawson. Detective Michael Hayes had protected him for years. Emma found the evidence while working as Richard's personal assistant. The moment she realized the truth, her life was in danger. She secretly copied every document. She recorded every meeting. She collected enough proof to destroy them forever. But before she could expose the truth, they made her death look like a tragic accident. Tears filled my eyes. Emma had known she might never come home. That was why she had written the letters. She wanted the truth to survive even if she did not. Sophie quietly handed me one final envelope. Emma told me to give you this only after you learned everything. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was the last letter Emma would ever write. Dear Adam, if you are reading this, then you finally know the truth. I wanted nothing more than to grow old with you. But sometimes life asks us to make impossible choices. I could have destroyed the evidence and saved myself. But innocent families would have continued to suffer. If I could live my life again, I would still make the same decision. Because love is not only about protecting the person you love. Sometimes love means protecting people you will never meet. Please do not waste your life chasing revenge. Give the evidence to someone you can trust. Then let me go. Find happiness again. That is the only thing I have ever wanted for you. I could no longer hold back my tears. For 5 years I believed Emma had left me forever. Now I finally understood. She had never truly left. She had been guiding me every step of the way. The next morning I handed every document, every photograph, and every video to a national investigative journalist. Within days the story exploded across the country. Richard Lawson was arrested. Detective Michael Hayes was suspended and later charged with corruption, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy. Dozens of families finally received justice. Months later, I visited Emma's grave. I placed a single white rose beside the headstone just as I had done every year. This time I was not crying because I had lost her. I was smiling because I had finally kept my promise. The wind gently moved through the trees. For a brief moment it felt as though Emma was standing beside me. Not as a ghost. Not as a memory. But as the courage that had changed my life forever. I whispered one final sentence. I found the truth, Emma. Now you can finally rest in peace. 3 days after the arrests, the city slowly returned to normal. The news channels called Emma a hero. Newspapers wrote about the woman who had sacrificed everything to expose the truth. But none of that brought her back. I still woke up every morning expecting to hear her voice. One evening Sophie called me. Her voice sounded nervous. There is something you need to see. I drove to her studio immediately. She was standing beside an old cardboard box. I thought I had already given you everything Emma left behind, she said. But while cleaning the storage room, I found this hidden behind a wall. My heart started beating faster. Inside the box were old books, a scarf, a broken camera, and a small wooden case. The case was locked. Attached to it was a tiny label. For Adam. Only after everything is over. I carefully opened the case. Inside was a small digital recorder. There was only one audio file. I pressed play. Emma's voice filled the room. Hello, my love. If you are listening to this, then you survived. That means you were stronger than I ever imagined. I am so sorry that you had to carry this burden. I wanted to protect you. But I knew they would come after anyone connected to me. That is why I disappeared from your life before they could destroy yours too. I closed my eyes as tears rolled down my face. Emma continued speaking. There is one final truth you deserve to know. The day I died, I was on my way home to tell you everything. I wanted us to leave London together. I had already packed our passports. I had bought 2 plane tickets. We were going to start a new life somewhere no one could ever find us. But they found me first. The recording stopped for a moment. Then another voice could be heard in the background. A man's voice. It was Richard Lawson. He sounded angry. Where is the evidence, Emma? Tell me now. Emma answered calmly. You will never find it. A loud crash echoed through the recording. Then everything went silent. I could barely breathe. Sophie reached over and held my hand. Neither of us spoke. The room felt colder than ever. As I placed the recorder back into the wooden case, I noticed something hidden beneath the velvet lining. There was a tiny folded photograph. I unfolded it carefully. It showed Emma standing beside an elderly woman I had never seen before. Written on the back in Emma's handwriting were the words, "She knows the last secret. Find her before they do." Below the message was a single name. Margaret Hill. My heart sank. If Margaret was still alive, she might be the last person who knew exactly what happened to Emma. And if the people behind Emma's murder discovered her first, the truth could disappear forever. Without wasting another second, Sophie and I left the studio. Neither of us realized that a man in a dark coat was watching us from the other side of the street. The moment our car disappeared around the corner, he picked up his phone and quietly said, "They are going to Margaret." The drive to Margaret Hill's house felt longer than any journey I had ever taken. Neither Sophie nor I spoke. The only sound inside the car was the rain hitting the windshield. Every minute felt precious. If the man watching us had already warned someone, then we were running out of time. According to the address written on the photograph, Margaret lived in a small village just outside London. Her cottage stood alone at the end of a narrow country road. When we arrived, the front gate was wide open. My heart immediately sank. Something was wrong. I hurried toward the front door and knocked several times. There was no answer. The door slowly opened with a gentle push. The house was completely silent. Furniture had been turned upside down. Drawers were hanging open. Pictures had been ripped from the walls. Someone had searched every corner of the house. Margaret called Sophie. There was still no reply. Then I heard a weak voice from upstairs. "Help!" We ran toward the sound. An elderly woman was sitting on the floor with her hands tied behind her back. I quickly untied the ropes. She looked at me with frightened eyes. "You must be Adam," she whispered. "Emma said you would come one day." Before I could ask another question, she grabbed my hand. "You have to listen carefully. There is not much time." She told us that Emma had trusted her more than anyone else. Years earlier, Margaret had worked as a legal advisor for Richard Lawson. She had secretly collected evidence of his crimes. When Emma discovered the truth, the two women worked together to expose him. But someone inside the police department warned Richard before they could go public. That was the moment Emma realized her life was in danger. Margaret slowly stood up and walked toward an old fireplace. She removed one loose brick from the wall. Behind it was a small metal envelope. She handed it to me. "This is the only copy Emma never told anyone about." Inside were original contracts signed by Richard Lawson, hidden bank records, and one handwritten confession from a former employee. It was enough to prove that Emma had been murdered to protect the corruption network. Suddenly we heard tires screech outside the house. Several car doors slammed shut. Margaret's face turned pale. "They found us." We looked through the window. 3 black vehicles had stopped outside the cottage. 4 armed men were walking toward the house. One of them pointed directly at the front door. Sophie whispered, "We have to leave now." Margaret shook her head. "There is a tunnel beneath this house. It was built during the Second World War. Follow me." She pulled back an old carpet in the kitchen. A wooden trapdoor appeared beneath it. We climbed down into the narrow tunnel just as the front door was kicked open upstairs. Heavy footsteps echoed through the house. Voices shouted our names. Holding the envelope tightly against my chest, I followed Margaret through the darkness. After several minutes, we reached a hidden exit deep inside the forest. We climbed outside and looked back toward the cottage. Police cars were arriving from the opposite direction. The armed men jumped into their vehicles and disappeared before the officers reached the house. Margaret looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Emma protected this evidence with her life. Now it is your turn to protect the truth." As we drove away, my phone vibrated once again. It was a message from an unknown number. This time there were only 5 words. "The game is not over yet." The message stayed on my phone screen for several seconds. "The game is not over yet." I looked at Sophie. Neither of us said a word. We both knew that even though Richard Lawson had been arrested, there was still someone helping him from the outside. Someone powerful. Someone who wanted every piece of evidence destroyed. We drove Margaret to a safe location arranged by an investigative journalist named Daniel Brooks. Daniel had been working with the National Crime Agency for months. Unlike the local police, he could not be influenced by the corrupt officers involved in the case. The moment Daniel saw the documents, his expression changed. He looked at me and quietly said, "This is enough to reopen every investigation connected to Richard Lawson. But we need one final piece of evidence." I asked him what was missing. He replied, "The person who ordered Emma's murder. Richard paid for it. But someone else gave the order. Without that name, the people behind this will escape." Those words hit me like a hammer. Emma had died because of a much larger conspiracy. Daniel opened one of the old contracts and noticed something unusual. There was a series of numbers written in the corner. They looked like random digits. Margaret immediately recognized them. They are not numbers. They are storage unit codes. Emma once told me she hid something where nobody would ever think to search. Daniel smiled. "Then we still have one chance." That evening we drove to an abandoned warehouse near the River Thames. Behind the building stood dozens of old storage units. After several minutes we found the correct one. The lock was old and covered with rust. I inserted the key we had found weeks earlier. The door slowly rolled upward. Inside was a single wooden desk. A dusty chair. and an old metal filing cabinet. Everything looked untouched. I opened the cabinet. Most of the drawers were empty. Then I noticed a false panel at the back. Behind it was a thin black folder. Inside were photographs, voice recordings, and signed statements. At the very bottom was one sealed envelope marked, "Open only if I do not survive." My hands trembled as I opened it. The letter was short. "Adam, if you are reading this, then I was right. Richard Lawson is not the real mastermind. Everything leads back to one person. Commissioner William Harper. He controls the officers who protect Richard. He ordered my death because I refused to hand over the evidence. Trust no one until these files reach the national authorities." I looked at Daniel in complete shock. Commissioner Harper was one of the most respected police officials in the country. No one would ever suspect him. Daniel immediately copied every file and contacted a trusted federal prosecutor. Within hours, arrest warrants were approved in complete secrecy. The next morning, Commissioner Harper arrived at police headquarters expecting another ordinary day. Instead, he was surrounded by officers from the National Crime Agency. He tried to deny everything, until Daniel played one final recording. It was Harper's own voice giving the order. "Make sure Emma Carter never talks again." The room fell silent. Harper lowered his head. Without another word, he was placed in handcuffs. As the officers led him away, he looked directly at me. A strange smile appeared on his face. Then he quietly said, "You still have not found her last letter." My heart stopped. Last letter. I thought I had already read every message Emma had left behind. If Harper was telling the truth, then somewhere, one final letter was still waiting for me. Commissioner Harper's words echoed inside my mind. "You still have not found her last letter." For days I searched through every box, every photograph, every notebook, and every memory Emma had left behind. There was nothing. No hidden envelope. No secret message. No final goodbye. Then one quiet Sunday morning, Sophie called me. Her voice sounded excited. "Adam, I think I found something." I drove to the old apartment where Emma and I had lived during the first years of our marriage. The building was scheduled for renovation. Most of the apartments were empty. Sophie was standing in the living room holding a small wooden picture frame. "Do you remember this?" she asked. I smiled sadly. It was our wedding photograph. She turned the frame over. One corner looked thicker than the rest. I carefully removed the back panel. Hidden inside was a folded white envelope. My hands began to shake. Across the front were two simple words. "For Adam." I knew immediately. This was the final letter. I slowly unfolded the paper. "My dearest Adam, if you are reading this, then everything is finally over. I prayed every single day that you would survive this journey. I never wanted revenge. I only wanted the truth to be free. If justice has been served, then my heart is finally at peace. There is something I never told you. Not because I did not trust you, but because I wanted to protect you. The greatest gift you ever gave me was not our wedding. It was making me believe that real love still exists in this world. You gave me a home whenever you held my hand. You made ordinary days feel extraordinary. You loved me when I had nothing to offer except my heart. Please do not spend the rest of your life visiting my grave. Carry me in your memories instead. Travel to the places we dreamed about. Laugh without feeling guilty. Fall in love again if your heart ever chooses to. Do not think of it as replacing me, because no one ever could. Love does not disappear. It simply grows large enough to make room for new happiness. And whenever you see the first snow of winter, smile. Because you will know I kept my promise. I will always be with you. Love always. Emma." I could no longer hold back my tears. For several minutes I sat in complete silence. Sophie gently placed her hand on my shoulder. Neither of us needed to say anything. Months passed. The trials finally came to an end. Richard Lawson. Detective Michael Hayes. Commissioner William Harper. and everyone involved in Emma's murder received long prison sentences. The families they had hurt received justice. Emma's name was cleared forever. 1 year later on my birthday, I visited the cemetery for the last time. I placed a single white rose beside Emma's grave. Then I smiled. Not because I had forgotten her, but because I had finally learned to live again. As I turned to leave, soft snowflakes began falling from the sky. I looked up and closed my eyes. For the first time in many years I felt peace. Not because Emma had returned, but because her courage, her love, and her sacrifice would live inside me forever. Sometimes the people we lose never truly leave us. They remain in every promise they inspired us to keep, and every step we take because they taught us how to keep moving forward. That was the last letter Emma ever wrote, and it was the first day of the rest of my life.